there was a minor incident and I had to like send the bike to get fixed. And because of that, I started going in the bus.
Okay.
And I had nothing to do on the bus. So I took a book that my dad had gifted me on my last birthday. It was actually a self-help book.
Okay.
I started reading it. And initially it was just like, for something to do while I was on the bus. It was like a 1 hour trip one way. And when I actually started reading it, I was like, this is so cool. And as I went on, the book mentioned listening to audio programs. I guess the book was old, and I took that to mean podcasts. So I started listening to podcasts as well, like Jay Shetty's podcast or
Yeah.
the Tim Ferriss show.
Yep.
And I started getting deeper into all of these things and then taking those changes, applying it to my own life. It got to a point where my friends were sick of me telling them about all of this because I used to constantly be like, you should work on this, you should try doing that. And then eventually, this year in Jan, I decided to try to share whatever I'd learned and with the world, basically. And I thought doing a podcast was a good way to do that.
Oh, cool. So it was like the way that
That's
you
how.
had been learning through podcasts, and then you're able to use that same platform to share what you're learning.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, cool. So what about the name? Like, tell me about like the name of your podcast. What's behind that? I know I'm in that same world where you put a lot of thought into that. So tell me
Right.
a little bit about that.
Sure. So I guess initially whenever I'd listen to a new concept or come across something that I could try out, for a while I used to struggle with the idea because I felt that this is something I'm supposed to figure out anyway. If it worked for them, it has to work for me.
Okay.
And oftentimes it didn't. Sometimes it did, right? Like because you can't possibly have everything generalized and make it work for everybody. And I struggled to make it work for me. It didn't until I got to a point where I realized that maybe this is not supposed to work for me. It worked for somebody else, which is great. And I wanted to have that idea normalized that this is something you should always keep in mind, that just because it worked for Steve Jobs doesn't mean it has to work for you. So that's how I came across the name. And yeah, I wanted to keep it generic just to give me a little flexibility as to not completely narrow it down to say a particular thing like self-experimentation only. So what works for you, I thought was a pretty generic title to go ahead with.
Okay, got it. But it's so that area of self-experimentation it seems like it's kind of like woven throughout, what you're sharing. So tell me why you feel like that's so important. Because I'm on the same page. Like, I think that's great. Tell me your perspective on self-experimentation.
I think, whenever you come across something, right? For example, if you've come across manifestations, the idea of visualizing something and attracting positive energies from the universe. I don't want to mock the concept, but it gives off the idea that say you just have to think about something and it'll magically come to you.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
then there are other things as
There it
well
is.
that exactly. And there are a lot of things that you need to actually try out and understand if it's going to work for you or not. Because what happens a lot of the time is the first thing is that you'll come across something and you'll keep delaying it to a point where you want it to be perfect or you want it to be just right. It's either that or the second thing is you'll probably judge it once and just let it go that this is not something I'm built for.
Yeah.
But that's I don't think that's the right way to go, because then if you stop accepting beliefs that aren't your own, that way you will never grow, right? You need to have an open mind even for things that you don't relate with, and just try them out once before you give an opinion.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So that's why I think self-experimentation in general is a good thing. And another thing, of course, is that you always have science-backed studies with a lot of things out there, like journaling, meditation. They have say positive benefits. but it's always good to like just try it out and just see for yourself that yes, this works, or maybe it doesn't.
Okay. So like what I'm hearing is um, experiment, but kind of make educated guesses based on the science that you can find available that applies to your situation.
Um, yes, I think that's true. I think even with that, when you do have these science studies going on, again, it comes to generalization. They take this big sample set of people, say 300 or 500 or whatever, and then that goes out into the world. And again, it may work for you. There's a good chance because there's a study that's been published,
Mm-hmm.
but it just might not. And to figure that out, that's where I think experimentation comes in. I think I'm
Yeah.
repeating myself
Yeah.
now, but yeah.
That's okay. I w- I feel like too, like as you were explaining self-experimentation a little bit, that it almost and as opposed to like perfectionism, it when you view it as like I'm a work in progress, this is a process, it almost takes the pressure off a little bit, right?
That's true. It does.
Yeah. So I feel like that shift, and for our listeners, they're focused on fitness related goals, weight loss, improving strength, and maybe even just making these habits a consistent part of their life, right? That I feel like that approach would really benefit them rather than trying to like do everything perfect. Like, do you feel like that's true? And if so,
I,
how so?
because I think that if you ever want, first off, I don't think that you can be like 100% perfect at anything, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah.
You'll probably just miss out on that last percentage of whatever, however you define perfection. That's
Hmm.
number one. And then number two is the reason I think experimentation is important is that the idea that don't try to fix something unless it's not broken is wrong.
Mm.
That's just wrong. If because what happens is eventually you will get complacent with whatever is working for you right now at this point if you stop experimenting, and then that way you're just like flatlining your growth altogether.
Huh.
Some of the best experiences that I've had in life is when I tried to explore even though something was already working for me.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
that I think that's like a process of constant evolution and just working on yourself rather than which again the end goal would be somehow to become as perfect as possible, but it's important to not let perfection be a barrier for you to begin.
Yeah.
I want to get this just right, and that's when I'll begin. Otherwise
Gotcha.
I won't.
Okay.
So yeah, I
Because
guess.
what you're saying is once you reach, that place that you're shooting for, there's always going to be another place to go to get better. So
Mhm.
don't settle in on achieving that, but also don't think like that's the end goal, because if you feel that way, you're going to actually move backwards. Almost
Maybe
like
not move.
if you're not growing, you're dying. That saying.
Um, I guess that could be one way to look at it. One thing is definitely the point where that you mentioned that it's important that you keep growing, but at the same time, I don't want to stress on growth because it's important to also celebrate what you've achieved so far. I
Mm,
think that's super important. If you're always constantly just trying to get better without looking at how far you've come, you might just lose sort of thing that drives you to get better in
yeah,
the first place.
sure. Almost like um I'm unhappy with where I'm at, and that's why I have to keep growing. Then you're using negative feelings to try to motivate you, and that doesn't really
Right,
work.
right.
Okay, cool. So is it okay if I switch gears a little bit and into talking a little
Sure.
bit about morning routines? I know I know you're busy. I want to be respectful of your time, but some of the work that you've done around that, I was really intrigued by, because I think, in terms of like, especially with fitness, that
Hmm.
that comes in the early part of the day for a lot of people who are consistent with it.
Right.
So how did you kind of attack the process of looking at your morning routine and developing it?
I think in the beginning it was really ad hoc. I had this sheet of paper where I wrote down 5 things I wanted to do. I think it was exercise, meditation, solving a puzzle, reading a book, and listening to a podcast. I think
Okay.
it was these 5 things, and I always consistently managed to skip out on meditation. And even I think solving a puzzle. I did the remaining three, and this was I think last year. And then eventually I started to come around the idea of meditating every day. It took a while to build that habit as well. Eventually I came to tracking my morning routine, like if I did these things every day or no, making checklists. And yeah, there's a lot of shuffling, even with the time I started my morning routine, the time at night when I slept, and just there was I think I've, I've changed my morning routine at least 15 to 20 times over the year. There have been phases where I didn't do it for 7 or 8 days at a time, and it's been a very bumpy journey, I would say, but recently it's become somewhat stable.
Okay.
After I read Atomic Habits, I tried to bring some of those principles and use them to build my morning routine better. And then I think that's when it sort of changed, and now it's pretty consistent. But it took a long time. I just think that two really important things throughout the journey that I
Yeah.
learned was uh, tracking is important. What gets measured gets done.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's essential that you have some sort of a tracking mechanism. And another thing is you want to keep it planned enough so that you're not spending a lot of time thinking in the morning, what should I do next? Because
Uh,
then there's a lot of decision making that you need to do, and it just saps your willpower.
okay.
We
Interesting.
are, yeah.
Cool. As you're talking about tracking, I was like, I wonder how much your focus on like computer science and
Mm-hmm.
that process plays into your the self-experimentation and how things went with your morning routine. Do you feel like that there's something to that?
I don't think with tracking, if you mean using softwares to track, is that something you're talking
Yeah, I
about?
just feel like that kind of that analytical, like, hey, like I'm gonna just try tracking it. What am I gonna try? Like I was like, oh, I don't I wonder if the average person would have come to that conclusion so quickly, or if there's something about your approach to it that had some extra value there. I don't know. I also thought it was interesting as you were talking about your setbacks and your failure,
Mm-hmm.
you had a smile on your face. I was like, most people are like, yeah, I tried it, didn't go well. Like they'd feel kind of disappointed. But
Mm-hmm.
what's behind your kind of your smile to talking about your failures?
I I think with the morning routine specifically, it's because that during those times when I did fail to like continuously and consistently for days at a time not follow it, it was like day one I was disappointed, day two
Mhm.
it was a little more, and eventually it got up to a point where day eight I'm so frustrated with this gap that I've had. Day nine it's sort of starting to come back on track.
Okay.
And I just know that whenever there is a break like that, it occurs eventually. It'll happen maybe every 3 or 4 months. That frustration that sort of builds up, or that disappointment that builds up, that is the very factor that gets me back on
Interesting.
track.
Okay. Wow. Um, cool. What particularly about the morning routine have you found is so valuable? I mean, like, could you do those things at a different time of day and get the same benefit? Or is there something to those morning hours that you found to be really kind of special?
No, I don't think, at least for me, it doesn't work doing those same things later in the day or in the evening. It's just not the same feeling.
Okay.
So there's a multiple, there are a lot of reasons behind that. Number one is when you're doing something in the morning, it's like something like exercise. Exercise, if you're not focused on, say, weight loss or a particular goal like that, your only idea behind exercise is to stay fit,
Mm-hmm.
then it's something that you need to do every day, right? Or whatever
Yeah.
routine you follow in terms of frequency. So it's nice to get that out of your, say, your work day or your working hours in the morning. You have that checked off right off the list, and you're done with exercise. You know that you've done your part in
Yeah.
staying healthy, being fit. That's one. I've noticed that if I delay exercise until, say, the evening, it's harder to stop working or whatever it is I'm doing. Or if it's like, if I'm watching a movie, it's just really hard to hit pause and go work
Okay.
out. In the morning, there's nothing like that actually distracting me from, doing like that. And I know that I'm going to do this. It's much more fun, and the air is cooler. So yeah. So I think point one is you get it out of your work day right in the morning.
Okay.
And for the second thing is, you connect with nature a lot better. I
Hmm.
love sunrises,
Okay.
and every morning, right now I'm not going because I have exams, but otherwise I usually go up to the roof. I take a book with me. So
Okay.
that's where I read, and I'm also like looking at the sky, and it's
Yeah.
really peaceful.
I've seen that on your Instagram, like some like the pictures of the morning
Right.
shots. Like it's awesome. Huh. I didn't expect you to say that about connecting with nature. That's really cool.
It's fun because, since everybody's at home right now, you don't really go out like you used to.
Hmm.
It's just a nice change of your environment right in the morning.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Anything else? I don't know, those 2 points was there more, or were those the two that you wanted to share?
No, I think in addition to that, if I had to bring up another point, it would probably be with meditation. It's easier to do it in the morning for some reason, at least for me.
Okay.
But again, there is a catch here. Before I meditate, I make sure to journal, because
Okay.
if when you wake up, sometimes you have thoughts racing through your head, and it makes it hard to meditate. So I just get all of them out on paper, and then I meditate. So it's a nice, I would say, sequence to have.
Okay. Gotcha. I'm curious. I mean, I think like the main challenge that most people might have with the morning routine is getting out of bed. Is that
Right.
something for you that you're just always been an early riser, like I just wake up and I'm up, or was that something that you had to work on?
I had to work on it. I
Okay.
was not an early riser at all.
Do you have any tips on that? Like how to like make those first moves in the morning out of bed?
Sure. Tip one, your morning routine starts in the night before, on the night before. Sleep
Okay.
on time. I think most people miss that, because if you keep, say, doing whatever it is, if you're working or scrolling or binging, if you're up till 12 in the night, you cannot expect to get up at 5 in the morning. That's just a very bad expectation to have. And even if you do pull it off, it's not sustainable over the long
Okay.
term to sleep 5 hours a night. So yeah, step one would be sleeping on time. And I think there's a lot of research that is built around your whole sleep cycle,
Hmm.
which I found when I was doing an episode on that. Something I came across was, your body's internal clock that regulates your sleeping cycle. It releases hormones for you to feel sleepy, and then when you wake up, it makes you feel energetic. So those are regulated by a lot of things around you. For example, sunlight is an important, I'd say, factor that fits into my routine. At least I've noticed that whenever I get sunlight in the day or even in the morning, it's easier to fall asleep on time versus when I don't.
Okay.
And for even for caffeine, I think whenever I have a cup of coffee or tea in the evening, I wake up in the middle of the night at like 2 or 3 a.m. Very randomly. I don't even know
Okay.
why. And that is something that, so there are, yeah, these are the few things to just
Interesting.
have a better quality of sleep and to make sure that you actually follow through your sleep on
Interesting.
time.
So yeah,
But
so
it,
focusing on the morning routine starts with focusing on your sleep quality and your
yes,
sleep schedule.
yeah, that's right. It does take time. I mean, you if you normally sleep around 11, then it'll take time for you to like slowly bring that down to 9:30 or 10,
Mm-hmm.
whenever it is you want to sleep.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. Thank you. Oh wow. All right. I already went OT on you. I'm overtime. Um,
That's
one
fine.
final question.
Sure.
If someone was listening to this and
Mm-hmm.
the idea of like the morning routine or even self-experimentation is just like totally brand new to them,
Mm-hmm.
what recommendation would you have to help them get started? Like, what advice would you give to someone like just to take those first few steps? Like, how might they do that?
I would say start with trying to integrate one activity. If you're talking about morning routines,
Mm-hmm.
don't try to do all of them at once. Like having exercise, meditation, journaling, everything at once. You can try to like wake up 30 or 40 minutes before you normally do and just do one of those things. And once you think you have that set, then move on to the next
Okay.
activity you want to have in the morning. And of course, sleep is important. You need to sleep on time. And for self experimentation, I think my advice would be to have an open mind,
Okay.
just to be open to something that is completely against all of your beliefs and to try it out. And then if you still think it's not right for you, let it go. But I would say, yeah, don't just like judge it, or I'm not gonna try this because I don't think it will work. That I think is something that might make you miss out on a really great habit or an opportunity to work on yourself.
Okay. Wow. Cool. Thank you. Hey, thanks so much for sharing your research and your thoughts with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.